I'm going to tell you how to get your first software development job. I even changed my whole career and I managed to land a job in the software development space. So I've got some tips to give you on how to secure an interview and how to actually pass an interview and get a job. Now, depending on your background, it might be slightly different for you, but I'm going to start at the point where you have some experience and you know how to code. Even if that's just a self-taught beginner level, you've done a computer science degree or you've done a boot camp. I've done a boot camp. So I'm talking about that kind of level and moving from there into how to actually get a job now. Now, before sending your CV out to a bunch of companies and just hoping for the best, I would actually take a look at your CV in more detail, and I'll tell you what feedback I got on mine because I was lucky to have a career coach as part of my boot camp. And some things that they mentioned is including any projects from your GitHub and then actually hyperlinking that on your CV. So you must save your CV as a PDF because that's pretty much the standard. But having those linked directly to your projects makes it very convenient for someone to scout and kind of see what kind of things you've been doing. And I would also put your projects quite high up on the order of your CV because that's your probably biggest selling point. So I wouldn't just put them all at the end because they might have got bored of your CV. I mean, you don't know who's looking at your CV and how many applications they have to go through. So you don't want to end it with your best. You want to start it off with your best showcase of things. And make sure you put the buzzwords. So what I do is when I'm applying for jobs, on LinkedIn specifically, they have a lot of tags related to that job. So they might have JavaScript tag or TDD, test-driven development tags, or things that are involved in the job. And I would try and, if you're applying for a specific job, try and use those tags or those buzz keywords in your CV. If the CV is going through an automated system, then it's better to have as many buzzwords in it that will get picked up. I'm not an expert on these systems, but that's what I've heard from people that are in recruitment as well. Now, I mentioned putting projects on your CV. That's another really important thing to include is projects. You need to do projects to showcase your coding skills because otherwise, no one's gonna care. Anyone can say they can code. I can code. I can use this language, JavaScript, C#, C++. I'm an expert. Got nothing to show for it. It means shit. So if you haven't already, I would at least get 2 projects on your CV before you start applying for jobs because you almost don't want to waste some job opportunities. If you can get even small projects done within a week or 2 and just have a couple there and kind of give a short description about what you've learned in the project or what tech stack you've used and link it like I said, that will be really, really helpful. And then the interviewer or recruiter can see, yep, this person has said that they can do this and I can see that in their GitHub. So now you've got a few projects and you've also sorted out your CV. So now you can send off your applications to whichever jobs you're looking for. And then now is the time to just wait until someone reaches out to you. Usually recruiters will, reach out and kind of ask you a few questions. What interests you about this job? That's usually like a 5-10 minute call just to see if you're seemingly the right fit. It's not really any technical or proper interview questions. But the best thing you can do is just really sound confident in your ability because most of the interview process is just selling yourself. And I'd say 80% of it is how you come across. So that's really important. I mean, if you're not the most confident person, I would probably practice a lot. Practice in front of the camera like I'm doing and pretend you're actually in this call. So if someone asks you, so you said on your CV you can use JavaScript, in what capacity have you done that? Just be confident and also honest and talk about your experience and how you've used it in your projects. Be sure of yourself Otherwise, they're not going to be sure of you if you sound like nervous or, you're struggling to come up with something to talk about. So just make sure you know your CV like the back of your hand, and you're able to talk a bit about your ability and experience. Once you've hopefully secured an interview with a company, it's usually going to be a few stages long. So this first interview is pretty much going to follow the structure of some competency-based questions and questions like, why do you want to work for the company? They want you to talk about your CV again, but in more detail. And they can also ask you questions like, if you had a conflict in a team project, how did you resolve this? And if you haven't had team projects, maybe you've had previous work experience, even in retail or anything, and they'll ask you about it. So just have those answers ready, or have something in your mind that you can talk about for whatever questions they're going to ask. Now, again, if you come across confident and you showcase your ability and talk about your projects, you'll probably get through to the next stage, which is going to be either a face-to-face interview, which is usually an hour too long, where they'll probably give you more competency-based questions, more technical questions, and maybe even a coding test. For the coding test, I would use things like Code Wars, Elite Code to just do questions and practice being able to answer them. And the more you do, the better you'll get. And usually they allow you to do it in your chosen language if you're comfortable with something. For me, I got FizzBuzz. I would have mentioned that in the video when I was talking about the interview process. You can go watch that if that's going to be helpful for you, because I literally talk about every stage. But I'd say the most important thing about doing a coding test is talking about what you're doing and the logic behind it, because sometimes even if you don't get the answer right, if they can see your thought process and your attitude towards solving the problem, then it can come off as really positive, and it looks like you're a calm and collected person, because you're not just sitting there in silence panicking like, what the hell is FizzBuzz? So when I was doing mine, I got different outputs and they weren't exactly what I was after, and I was like, maybe it could be because of the order of my if statement, or I'm not actually getting an output because I'm not calling the function. And I spoke that out loud and let them know what I was thinking. For the technical questions, I feel like these are just things that you should memorize. Things like solid principles comes up, and that's just something you need to memorize. Even if you use that in your approach, you should probably kind of refresh the definition of each letter. Also look into the job description, because that's the perfect place to look when you're thinking, what questions could they ask me? If they mention that we want someone who can object-oriented program, then they're probably going to ask you about solid principles. Or if they mention TDD, they might ask you a question related to that. If they have an SQL database that they want you to use, they're going to ask you, what is a left join, what is a right join? So you just need to do your research on common questions. There's so many resources online for common interview questions related to a specific topic. So for that section, I would just you might not know everything they ask you, but as long as you kind of have an idea of most stuff, you'll be fine. And for the rest of the questions are more general, and they're really trying to see who you are as a person and your personality type, and to see if you actually will fit in to their team or in the company. So this is not the time to just not talk. This is the time to this is the time to sell yourself, basically. They'll probably ask you about your hobbies, but if not, try and bring it into the conversation. If they're talking about your projects that you do, for example, mine, I think I had some of my game development projects listed on my CV, And then that gave me a huge talking point where I talked about all the games that I did, and then I actually mentioned that I made devlogs and created YouTube videos about my process. So I used that one little point and was able to then talk about what I thought would help in terms of showing my personality. And I actually asked my manager, you know, in the process, did my game projects, you know, count for anything? Because I was curious. But he said it was mostly because I had showed that I was, you know, interested in development outside of work. So you've got so much value that you need to just kind of put on a plate for them. Otherwise, they're just not gonna know, and it's a waste. And the final thing is, at the end of your main interview, you've got to have some really good questions prepared. I think this just kind of shows what kind of person you are, and if you're actually genuinely interested in the job and in the company. And also, you know, interviewers like when you ask them interesting questions, nothing boring. There's tons of examples of great questions. You can go check my job interviews for, you know, questions that I asked. But even like things just to try and get to know them, to show that you're interested, and ask them, you know, what's the most favorite part of your job? Or, you know, what would a typical day look as a new developer that has moved into your team? And I think this just really shows that you're really in the mindset to start this job. And that also gets into their head if you're asking them, you know, how would I start my job in your team? It kind of puts it into their head, like they have to think about, if you were in their team, where would I put you? What would you be doing? And that's always good because it forces them to picture it. So that concludes that. Keep working hard and just be confident in yourself, because you can get a job. Even if the market's shit, you are gonna stand out.